you could sit down with your younger self, what financial advice would you give yourself? Hi, I'm Tim Clifford. I'm a certified financial planner, and I've been helping people grow or maintain their wealth for more than 30 years. I started my career out on the floors of the commodity exchanges in Chicago and moved into stocks and bonds 7, 10 years later. And I've worked for H&R Block Financial Advisors, Charles Schwab and Company, Ameriprise. And then in 2012, I went out on my own and started my own RIA with the idea of working directly with clients to help them either maintain or grow wealth, depending on what their goals were. And what I found very early on in this venture was I needed to come up with a way that was uniformly common across most people who were successful. And that's where this podcast kind of came from. Even though it took me 10 years to get here, I've started this PlanAssist podcast where I'm interviewing successful people who have accumulated $3, $4, $5 million. And I'm asking them one question once I've done the introductory to start the conversation. And that is, if you could sit down with your younger self, what financial advice would you give yourself? And then that will start us into this whole conversation. But one of the things that I want to kind of reiterate and kind of set up for some of these calls is I think you're going to find a theme. I think you'll find that there's 3 common things that successful people do over and over again, even if they don't call them these. So the wording that they may use may be different, but most of them you're going to find have a plan. They're going to be diversified, which is a nuance because to build wealth, they're going to have been probably concentrated, right? So to build wealth, you need to be concentrated. To maintain wealth, you got to be diversified. But there's strategies kind of in both of those. And then also it's kind of a time in life and where you're at. And then lastly, seek advice or seek counsel, seek advice, get input, however you want to word it, is the third strategy that most of these people will follow. And today what I'm going to do is take us through the first of the 3. So I'm going to kind of keep this short instead of doing one long video that kind of explains all 3 of the principles: have a plan, be diversified, seek counsel. I'm going to do it in a series of 3. So 3 shorter videos. And today we're going to touch on have a plan. I'm sure you found yourself kind of, what's next? I'm sure, over the years as you've kind of come out of college, got into your careers, even if you're in your 40s or 50s, you can relate to the idea of, what do I do next? What's the next kind of important financial decision that I need to make? And then how do I go about doing that? And sometimes that includes getting your significant other on the same page. And that's really where I found this PlanAssist format really works, because it's not only a good strategy, it's also a good communications plan. So it kind of aligns you with your significant other in your financial journey, and it starts putting some discipline around how do you make financial decisions. And so today what we're going to talk about is the plan. And I'm sure most of you have encountered people who will talk about, okay, we need to put a plan together, or you've sat down with someone who's put a plan together for you, and it ends up being a 30 or 45 page PDF document that you never went back and re-looked at, and they went through and asked you all your questions that you have, kind of where you at and all that. And I'm not going to downplay that. That's a really important process and step that you need to go through at some point. But for a lot of people, planning is overcomplicated. And I want to kind of explain what happens is the financial services industry does this to ourselves. So whether you're interacting with the financial advisor like myself, or you're interacting with an insurance agent, or you're interacting with a bank for that matter, what you're going to find is your first introduction to us in the industry will likely be a business development person, or a person who it gets paid to bring in new accounts, new assets. It's more in that sales role. And in order to really get to the value that organization offers, you pretty much have to get through the salesperson, which means you need to open an account, get a relationship built there. So almost all firms are capable of really helping you solve your problem. But I'm sure you can relate to this. You're not always confident that they can solve the problem, because it's kind of catch-22. You have to become a client first and then kind of see the team behind them. So there's very few financial advisors that don't have a full team of investment people behind them, portfolio management, professionals in taxes, etc. But in order to really engage with that group and see their competence and see how much they can help you specifically, you have to engage with them. So today what I'm going to do is knowing that that's true in the financial services business, what I want to do today is just give you kind of a high level place to start. So if you haven't engaged with a financial advisor, if you have, then that's fantastic. So it's likely that you're going to be probably 2 or 3 steps ahead, and I may not even get to that point other than just touch on it in this particular video. But if you're not, so if you're not working with a financial advisor, what I'm going to do is take you through kind of a few of the early steps that you might consider when you think about a plan. And again, we'll touch on diversification, we'll touch on seeking counsel later, but when you start putting a plan together and you feel overwhelmed, I'm going to kind of take you through some processes to think about that will help you kind of go down that path. Now, before I do this, I want to kind of be clear. A plan is a continuum, okay? So a plan doesn't there's not like one size fits all with a plan. So those of you who are familiar with Ramsey, he has his baby steps, and he'll have those, I think there's 9 or 10 steps that he takes you through in the baby steps. The first one being save up $1,000. Next one, pay off your credit card, starting with the smallest debt. He's got some rules around how to build that plan. That's nothing more than a plan, by the way. That is exactly what he's doing. That is specifically focused on an individual who's found themselves in debt. So that's a really good plan for some of the population, but it's a terrible plan for others in the population, because if they're not in debt, then they need to do a different first 2 or 3 or 4 steps and in different orders based on kind of where they're at. And I think that's what I tried to build with PlanAssist, is to make it flexible, not so much around a group of people that I could give general advice to, but how could I build a process that I could help individuals build specific advice that would apply to them individually, right? So to kind of reiterate this, the one thing you want to think about when you put a plan together is where you at and what's the problem you're trying to solve right now. And the best way I can describe where to get started, and I've worked with people who start off with, they have substantial assets and others with very little assets, and this still works, okay? So the first time you sit down with someone is you're trying to do kind of 3 things. You're trying to identify where you're at now. What is it we're doing right now? What are the main goals, and where are we trying to get to? And then lastly is, what's the order we need to do these in, or what's the step? So what do I need to do? First, second, and third. And that order really matters, by the way. So a lot of times I've seen people that'll have a really good strategy and they do it in the wrong order, and that turns into almost as big a disaster as not following any steps at all. So what I have found is, if you're just kind of out there on your own and kind of getting started and, kind of, okay, what do we do next? Think of this plan as kind of a here-there plan. And here's a good example of what I'm trying to explain. So if you think of a here-there plan, the first thing you do is kind of, where am I at right now? So where am I at on my income, my expenses? What's my debt situation? What insurance do I have? Do I have an umbrella policy? Do I have any holes in my insurance plan? What's my asset allocations? Do I have the liquidity I need over the next 12, 18 months, and then do I have my long-term money invested accordingly for long-term money and not sitting in money market accounts, as an example? Do I have a will? Now remember, 50% of the people in America do not have a will, and a will is an important part. I don't do wills, obviously. I'm a financial advisor, so you need to go to an attorney to do that, but it is a really important document to have in your files, because not only when you pass away, so that the people who you want to get your assets get assets and they don't have to go through probate, but also those kind of pre-documents that you need, like your financial power of attorney and your healthcare power of attorney, and then kind of taxes and expenses. So again, I'm just kind of giving you some high level buckets. You know this. Most people know what the 2 or 3 things they need to focus on. And then what I would do, or what I really try to help people with, is, okay, we know where we want to be, say 5 years from now, is to be financially independent and have funds and all that. So there's going to end up being a full financial plan at some point, because it's important to put into a software system to help us identify kind of the order of of decisions and what's next and how much money can we convert, as an example, from a regular IRA to a Roth IRA. Is that something, a strategy you want to even think about? Well, you almost need software to help us with those kinds of decisions. But a lot of times, to just get started, you only need to do something as simple as what you see on the screen. Kind of, okay, what are the things I want to focus on? Here's where I want to go in the next 3, 6, even 12 months. And then just do it. I mean, get those knocked out. And if you do them in 2 months, then go back to the process and take something else off the list and do 2 or 3. I find this is a very powerful way to help clients with kind of getting off center and getting started. So that is where I would really start, even though I want to reiterate that this is not, doesn't take the place of a really detailed plan using software. So think of this, once you get successful and you start getting old, or you start getting closer and closer to retirement, that's when the software, a full financial plan, becomes more important. And you probably want to do it with someone who's used to the technology. It's not that it's not that you couldn't do one of those self-financial planning software tools, but someone who is experienced and knowledgeable, a lot of times will know much faster and in a much less stressful situation to kind of put the data in and come out and say, okay, here's the 2 or 3 things you need to focus on. But think of the software as that step before you get into building a extension on your home. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you'll do before you actually start that building project. But at some point, you're going to hire an engineer that's going to put that stuff into a CAD software system to make sure that the walls, the windows, the ceiling, the roofs, everything that they're putting into that particular plan is appropriate and actually safe for you from a long-term perspective of building that building. That's kind of the same thing you want to think about a plan. At some point, you want to absolutely do a plan, but very likely starting with where am I at now? Where do I need to go? Is a really, really good strategy. So don't overthink this and perfection. That is seriously the enemy of most people with financial planning strategies. They make more than enough money. They have cash flow. They overthink the process and start trying to solve problems that need to be solved, but they probably don't need to be solved for the next 12 to 18 months. So focus on solving the problems that need to be solved, like in the next 3 to 6 months, and then do it again. And what you're going to find is once you kind of go through this process 4, 5, 6 times. So now you're 2 or 3 years into it. You're going to be shockingly surprised at how organized your financial situation is, and getting a clear understanding of where you are right this minute when you look at your assets, your income, your expenses, your insurance. Those kind of key pieces of your financial plan will become much, much easier to kind of, okay, now what do we need to do? And then you start dialing in and doing some kind of detailed strategies that can make a big difference over time. So with that said, I want to kind of end with one thing that I constantly talk about is financial success is not some event that you kind of plan for. It's the process that of all the decisions that you've made over decades, and then it's not any single one of those decisions. So think of it as every single financial decision in and of itself probably isn't terribly important to the financial plan, but the accumulation of those financial decisions absolutely makes a huge difference. So like and subscribe. I'd love an opportunity to kind of show you what diversification looks like, and then seeking counsel. And then also by liking and subscribing, you'll also be invited or made alerted to when I do these interviews with successful people. And you can actually look at the YouTube page, where you can actually see some past interviews that I've done with people who are successful, and kind of ask them that one question. If you could go back and give your younger self financial advice, what would it be? And then we just had a conversation around it. So I find it interesting and helpful. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate you spending some time listening to this. If there's anything that I messed up on or missed, or something you want to give a comment to, please comment below. I really appreciate it and look forward to it. So with that, thanks again. Have a great day.